The Rochester Symphony presents An Opera Affair, featuring the Rochester Symphony Orchestra and Chorale at Lourdes High School. Conducted by Maestro Jerry Lance. Opera got started, and it's interesting. Opera getting started was a specific intention. Most art forms just kind of happen, and then later we give them a name. This one started in the 1570s because some intellectuals, some poets, musicians, philosophers, important people in the community of Florence, Italy, wanted to create a new art, and they were calling it opera from the beginning. It was like art by committee, but a very smart committee. One of the members of the committee was Vincenzo Galilei, whose son Galileo Galilei didn't do bad with his telescope. Anyway, they got together and were looking back, as the Renaissance period was, to an earlier time, to ancient times. And they theorized that the parts called chorus in the old Greek dramas were spoken by many different people at once. And they thought, wouldn't it be great if that part of our drama were sung? And then they thought, wouldn't it be great if the entire drama were sung? That's all opera is. It's a play that's sung instead of spoken. So they decided to do that. In order to do that, instead of having the complex counterpoint of Palestrino and Lasso and other people of that time, they had to make a simple line of music. It had to be supported by simple harmonies that showed the direction of the ideas, the emotions, what's being communicated. And in so doing, they created what we call functional harmony, the idea that one chord can lead to another, and you know when you're moving somewhere, and you know when you've arrived. And that functional harmony has been the basis of Western music since that time. It started the Baroque era, and it even is the basis of rock and roll and pop music all the way till today. Next, on our romantic opera survey, we ought to have music by Giacomo Puccini. Puccini was the greatest composer of Italian romantic opera at the end of the 19th century in the Verismo style. The Verismo style means true to life. And the idea was that opera had traditionally been written from its beginnings around 1600, telling stories about the sophisticated, about nobility, about the upper crust of society, and all their issues and difficulties. At the end of the 19th century, humanity came to the fore, and they said, we shouldn't do music and opera about the most sophisticated, the wealthy. We should do it about the common people. And so instead of having sex and violence about the aristocrats, they had sex and violence about the common people, and it could be sexier and more violent because it was about the people in the villages. This was Verismo opera. The first Verismo opera was not written by Puccini, it was written by Mascagni, Pietro Mascagni. Mascagni created this in 1890, and we're not doing Puccini for Verismo opera because Puccini, frankly, didn't write great choruses for opera. Mascagni, in his the very first Verismo opera, wrote the most beautiful chorus ever created for an Italian opera at this time, and every time I do it, I get to the end of it, and I'm emotionally exhausted. I feel like I can't go on. Maybe I should have put it at the end of the program. Of course, we like to include American music whenever we can. The list of American composers who were successful at writing opera is not really long. Although Giancarlo Monati may lead the bunch, he was from Italy, came to America. And John Corigliano has done a great job too, another Italian-American who has been successful at opera. Aaron Copland is not known for opera. He's known for ballets, for symphonies, and fanfare for the common man. But in 1953, he wrote an opera called The Tender Land about the Western. It's a Western opera. And we're not doing the entire opera. It has never really succeeded as an opera. But there are two choruses in that opera that I think are the greatest choruses ever written by an American for any occasion. Pace, Randall Thompson, and his Alleluia, which I hold on the same level, but it's not with orchestra. This is choruses with orchestra. We start with Stomp Your Foot. Stomp Your Foot is a barn dance from the second act, and it's exactly what you think it is. It's a good old down-home barn dance, and if you want to clap along, that's fine. And then The Promise of Living, which talks about building community in America by loving each other, by working together, by making things happen. And couldn't we use more of that right now? It says more about how America built and should build a community than any other words or music that I know. You know, when you look at a list of the greatest opera composers, you don't see any American names on there. Maybe someday there will be an American opera creator, but some who have come from the opera tradition, like Giancarlo Monati, an Italian-American, and John Corigliano, who's an American but from an Italian extraction, they have something in their soul that has said something to the world of opera, but never quite on the level of a Mozart or a Verdi or a Wagner or Puccini or Mascagni. But Aaron Copland, in 1953, created an opera about the Midwest in the 1930s and the struggle to make a farm continue in the midst of the Dust Bowl time. It was a very touching opera, commissioned, incidentally, by Rodgers and Hammerstein, who took some of their wonderful earnings from their Broadway and said, we want to create an opera. We know we're not the people to do it. Let's get somebody who knows how to really compose. And they picked America's greatest composer, Aaron Copland, to do it. As an opera, The Tender Land is not a huge success, but there are two moments in there, two choruses, that represent to me the best in choral orchestral writing that America has ever done. Stomp Your Foot is exactly what it sounds like, a barn dance, and we'd ask you not to get up and dance in the aisles, if you don't mind. Just enjoy the piece. And then after that comes The Promise of Living, in which the text by Horace Everett and the glorious music by Copland combine to make, for me, the most simple, straightforward, and beautiful statement of what the American community is about, by working together, loving each other, sharing, and creating a community. And boy, couldn't we use more of that. Here's Aaron Copland.
Stomp your foot up on the floor. Throw the windows open. Take a breath of fresh June air and dance around the room. And dance around the room. Stomp your foot up on the
The Rochester Symphony's concert, An Opera Affair, continues, featuring the Chorale of the Rochester Symphony, next week. Please join us. This activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. The Rochester Symphony Orchestra Presents is a co-production of KSMQ Public Television, the Rochester Symphony Orchestra and Chorale, and Rochester Symphonic Vision Productions.